Carolyn Self, PhD, psychotherapy.
How would you define psychology?
Psychology?
Yes.
I guess it would be probing into the inner workings of a person's motivations, feelings, and biological processes.
Have you ever dealt with anxiety or depression in any case with clients?
Well, I've dedicated my professional life to anxiety disorders and the depression that can accompany those disorders.
And how would you help someone with said disorders?
First, you'd need to assess the symptoms that they're going through.
And what are some symptoms you would say?
Well, the symptoms of anxiety are the symptoms of the autonomic nervous system arousal. It can be a racing heart, shaking, trembling, hyperventilation, breathing that can be very stressful, brought about by stress, which is appropriate for a primitive response to a threat because the body is then equipped to send oxygen deep into the muscle. However, in modern day society, the threats that we face for the most part are psychological. So running, fighting, defending ourselves physically is not appropriate. So we've got to look at other ways of dealing with the autonomic nervous system. The other part of anxiety, a mood of fear, the urge to flee, which is basically noradrenaline or norepinephrine, which is a neurotransmitter. So the two together, while equipping a person to deal with a physical threat, can simply produce symptoms in our society because there is no discernible or concrete threat. So a sense of fear, an urge to isolate or leave a situation may be counterproductive, especially if you're sitting in a meeting.
Of course.
Okay? So, but anxiety is pandemic in the United States.
What would you prescribe? Not prescribe as medicine-wise, but just as life-wise for anxiety.
Well, you've got to lower the arousal of the autonomic nervous system so that the adrenaline and the noradrenaline, so that is actually lowered. You calm the autonomic nervous system, number one. Number two, you teach the person through cognitive restructuring to not fear those symptoms that they're going through. With cognitive restructuring, a change in the thoughts, the belief system that is one of, this is a bluff, I'm really okay, I'm not in any danger, can then allow the anxiety to be relieved. So the way we think about anxiety is extremely important in either its escalation or de-escalation. And basically to feel like, by overcoming anxiety, not to feel like, but to know that they've done something very courageous. And that kind of self-knowledge can be a good antidote for depression, helplessness, hopelessness, and can teach a person, can sort of give them that grit that it takes to face the hard stuff of life.
And I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
What would you say, who would have a higher chance of having anxiety?
Typically, well, actually in our society, it's almost impossible to not have anxiety. For one thing, we're rushed. We don't get as much sleep as people did. The demands on the autonomic nervous system for continual functioning habituates it to chronic levels of functioning. In other words, we can't shift gears because the body has become habituated.
You would say anxiety is more prominent in this day and era than it
I
was,
would
let's
say
say,
that.
40 years or 20 years ago.
I would, just because, if nothing else, for the rushing, late hours, stimulation of urban settings, and the conflict that we see in the breakdown of families.